Hello, you're very welcome to the third webinar in our series on supporting young people's well-being. This webinar coincides with the launch of the PARES-SEEK study. So it's a study looking at both parents and teenagers' mental health knowledge, and we'll be sharing details of that in the chat. And we really need some dads and some young people to participate. So we really encourage if there's any fathers here and any parents that they would encourage their young people to participate in it as well. And just to say that the results of this study will be really important in informing the mental health information needs for parents and young people. So to begin our webinar tonight, one good adult is a protective factor for young people's mental health. But a challenge for parents, teachers, and anyone that's concerned or wants to support a young person is how to initiate having a meaningful conversation with a young person about how they're feeling. So tonight, I'd like to introduce 3 clinical psychologists who are going to give their insights on how they think that you should talk to a young person. We were due to have a young person join us tonight, but due to unforeseen circumstances, he could not attend. So first of all, I'd like to introduce Dr. Charlotte Wilson. Charlotte's a clinical psychologist and assistant professor from Trinity College Dublin. She has research interests in all aspects of children's mental health with expertise in anxiety and worry. We have Professor Gary Donoghue. He's a professor and chair of psychology at NUIG. His research interest focuses on major mental health disorders in young people and adults. He's a European Research Council Fellow and a HRB research leader in youth mental health, and he's also a clinical psychologist and psychotherapist. And last but not least, Dr. Tony Bates. Tony was head of psychology at St. James's Hospital for 30 years, during this time he trained with Aaron T. Beck at the University of Pennsylvania. He founded Jigsaw, the National Centre for Youth Mental Health, in 2006, and he's been active in writing and shaping government policy since 2003. He's also an adjunct professor of psychology in UCD since September 2018. So to begin, to my panelists, what are your initial thoughts on how to have a meaningful conversation with young people about how they're feeling? So I might put it to you first, Tony, to start us off.
Oh, good evening, and good evening, everyone. Well, my first reaction to that question is to step back a little bit and try and take a moment to remember what we felt like when we were the age of the person that we're trying to talk to. And this comes from Mr. Rogers, who's a very famous child psychologist. And he said the reason people have difficulty relating to children is they've forgotten their own childhood. And I think with adolescence, it was for many of us, for most of us, a very exciting, exhilarating, unstable, frightening time. And I think when we can remember that, it's hard to remember, but if you can, get some sense of it. It's not a bad place to if you like, to tune your own listening instrument in, to start from. And then I think, with young people, the thing not to do, of course, is to say to them, I'm really worried about you. You don't seem to be having a good time. Tell me what's wrong. I mean, that's not a good idea. For the most part, that is terrifying. And the reason it is terrifying is that young people struggle to find language to say what they're feeling, and they struggle even more to try to figure out why they're feeling the way they're feeling. And it's kind of an impossible question to ask them. So number one thing, don't talk about your anxiety. I'm very anxious about, no, that's your problem. Don't talk about why you're feeling the way you're doing. That's not something they can answer. But, first of all, I would say pick your moment, I found in my own experience of raising 3 children that it was always challenging to find the right moment to talk. And I found, I think, for example, with my daughter, we used to have a thing where we'd go to the pictures on a Sunday night. It just was the sort of thing. She was about 10, 11, 12. And I think I saw Strictly Ballroom 5 times in 5 successive Sundays. But that was the day we didn't have video in those days. But the thing was, I found with her, the secret to talking was to say nothing on the way out to, say, Liffey Valley, with a bit of a drive, but on the way back, when it was slightly dark and she was sitting next to me, not face to face, and I would say, how are things going in school? You know, how are your friends getting on? I often ask about friends, you know, not her. And she'd tell me something that was happening, and I'd say, oh my God, how would anybody deal with that? I can't imagine. That's a very stressful thing. And then she'd tell me how she was dealing with it. Or I might say, how would you deal with something like that came up? I'm not sure I'd know what to do. And I think the thing is to pick the moment and then to be very surprised at what she said or what they say. And to realize that you're asking someone to speak a truth, and you may not like what you hear, but it may be very important that you do. And, you know, and you've got to be respectful of that. That's what they're saying is might sound to you petty, but it's not. It has some meaning for them. And they can't quite tell you why, but to be shared a problem by a young person is a great gift, you know, and we just have to really respect that. And I just think, you know, so I think pick your moment, and then I do remember once when my daughter was much younger, she wasn't that much younger, she was about 11, 12, and I picked her up from school, and she was at Rathmines, St. Louis, and I picked her up as I always did, and we were heading home, and she said to me, she was very upset, and she said, something awful happened today. And, you know, I'm a psychologist, I kind of know what bad things can happen for young people, so I got very alarmed. And I said, what happened? And she said, well, and she got really upset, and she said, well, you know, Francis, who was her friend, didn't speak to her once in the playground and had talked with Mary all day long. And you know, part of me wanted to say, like any normal human being, what is the problem, honey? You know, and thank God in that moment I didn't. Maybe that was 20 years of good psychology training. And I just said, oh my God, that sounds terrible. And she burst out crying. And I said, wow. And that's what she needed. You know, she needed to have her own moment of upset about something that I didn't even know who Francis was. I didn't know what the characters in this little drama, but for her, it meant something. And then it moved on. It changed, it moved on. So I think we have to pick our moment. I think we have to be respectful. We have to give people time, and we have to be kind of amazed at what we hear, that it's a gift and it's real and for that person. And that's enough to say for now, you know, but just as an opener.
Well, thank you for that, Tony. It's really useful tips there and for sharing those stories. Gary or Charlotte, do you have anything you'd like to add there? Any thoughts?
How do you follow that? Brilliant. You took so many words right out of my mouth, Tony. I just think that pick your moment is a brilliant example, and what a lovely thing to share with us about that time spent with your daughter, just on a regular basis, so it opens up that space, doesn't it? And I think that's the only thing I just really highlight of what you've said, is that what you've done is just invest in a beautiful, loving relationship with your daughter over time. That wasn't about talking about the difficult bits, but the basis of that meant that when it was time to talk, she knew you were there to listen. She knew you'd be respectful. It's just lovely.
Thank you. Later on, I can say, you know, it wasn't always like that, because, you know, when she turned about 14, I became her major embarrassment in life, and I would, you know, have to walk 10 paces behind when we went to school and so on, you know. So I think every parent knows that, every father knows that a teenage daughter generally turns against them for a period of time, because they need to push them away if they're to meet a man of their own, you know. But we picked up about 10, 15 years later. But you know, there was
Tony, I'm really glad to hear you say that, because so I'm in the middle of this phase of life right now, where I have a 20-year-old and an 18-year-old and a 16-year-old. And a friend of mine said to me recently, you know, when it comes to being a parenting at this stage, there are so many ways to be wrong. And I thought, that's the experience that a lot of us have as parents, you know. And I kind of smiled when I saw this first question. So we were given 4 questions to think about ahead of today. And today was a beautiful day in Galway, and I had a chance to go down by the Corrib River and think about a couple of these things. And one of the things that struck me is that communication is very personal. And I think Tony's story works because you're talking about a personal relationship between you and one daughter. And, you know, in my family, we have one child who, as soon as she opens the front door, everyone in the house knows exactly how she feels. It's super easy, you know. In psychological language, she might be called an externalizer, right?
Sure.
But we've another child grows up in exactly the same house who's almost the opposite. And so this idea of how you empathically wait for somebody to talk to you is a really, it's a challenge, you know. And there's a lovely line from a poem, I don't know where it comes from, but the line is, "Keep a green bough in your heart and the singing bird will come." And it's this idea of openness and waiting. And I on the one hand, what it says to me is it's about empathy. It's about looking out for the emotion and trying to recognize the emotion. But it's also about saying, a lot of the time you're wrong about what you think is going on, and what you end up hearing is different from what you're expecting. So that a big part of that empathy is about trying to just keep an openness that's not about judgments, that's not about prejudging, but it's about kind of expecting to be surprised.
Beautiful.
Yeah, that's lovely. Thank you, Gary. And I suppose one thing that's kind of coming to my mind when you're talking about this is, you know, if you're a parent then who is waiting for a young person to open up, how do you manage your own emotions and what's going through your own mind when you're so concerned about your child?
That's a really good one. I'm not sure I've got it yet. I'm yet there. So my 2 are 8 and 12, just to add to the picture. So I'm following you behind. I don't want to hear that 14 a nightmare. I'm not even imagining that yet. I think that's a really tricky one. And I think for me personally, as a mom, there are 2 parts to it. One is that there is an instinctive part that maybe it's the psychologist in me, maybe it's the mum in me, but there's the bit that just holds on, especially those awful words, something dreadful happened. As you said, Tony, my goodness, your imagination goes everywhere. You're not sure where it's going to be. And then it's something like that. And again, something like that, you just clench in your stomach as hard as you can so you don't smile, or as you say something that you regret later. And you just, your instincts kick in and you hold it. On the other hand, on another day, it is something dreadful, and something dreadful has happened and your heart breaks. And I think the only thing you can do then is do whatever is your thing. So again, literally mine is physical. I try and imagine that I'm pushing my stomach through down into the floor, through my legs down into the floor, and I hold on to it and I get rid of it later. That's my key, is that it's not that it doesn't affect me. It's the fact that it's my job. You said it beautifully, Tony. I'm the adult. This is my stuff. I need to be there. And then, but it doesn't mean I am not affected by it. I've just got to work. I usually call it the emotion hangover. I've got to work through it in the next couple of days. I know if I hold on to those feelings, I am grumpy and irritable for the next few days. So whether they've got angry at me, whether it's something that's really upset me, I've got to do that piece. I've got to talk to my partner. I've got to talk it out with a friend. I've just got to think it through. I've got to work it through myself.
I think also, it's the narrative that the story we have about adolescence, which I think is why it's really important to go back to our own, because most of us have gotten through very difficult times, really bad times, and we survived them. And we might regret some things we did to manage those times. And we would certainly want to save our own children the suffering that we went through. But here's the thing for me is that, they have made me the psychologist I am. I wouldn't be here if I hadn't gone through those times, and that those are very important times in our lives. And while I want to contain, my children in some sort of a safe space, even within that space, bad things will happen for them, hurt will happen. And what I need to hold on to is my faith that they can make it through. I've loved them, you've loved them, and Gary, you've loved them. And, in a funny way, you probably can't, you can't undo the good you've done. They have that in there. And that's what they're bringing to some of these difficulties. And it's important that adolescents are allowed to go through things that we don't know about, that they're entitled to some privacy in their life, and then we hear about them later, we're shocked. I had a son, I should just to balance, I've had 3 neurotic children, not just one, but I have a son, and I remember I had a short little book on depression, and we were clearing out the house one day, I was 19, and he picked it up, we were throwing this, getting rid of the old stuff, to the charity shop or something, and he said, "This is pretty good, actually." And I said, "Oh, really? How would you know?" I said, "I read it." I said, "Really?" I'm amazed, because he's like an engineer. This wasn't his thing, And I said, "Yeah." And then he said, "Yeah, I had a really bad time last year, and it was very helpful." And I thought, what? How dare you? You had a bad time and I didn't know about it. I mean, he had 2 parents who were psychologists. We had no idea. Another time he told his mother that at 16, he said, I think I'm going to stop drinking. And she literally, crashed the car. So I'm just saying, and again, that wonderful moment for me in visiting the Anne Frank Museum, as you walk out of the museum, which is a very moving experience, and you hear Otto, her father, on a 90-second loop on a TV, and he's saying, "I was very close to my daughter. I knew her as well as anyone before we had to go live together. And then for 2 years, we lived in each other's faces, and I knew everything about her. And then 2 years after the war, I read her diary and realized I didn't know this girl at all. There was so much I didn't know." And he said, no matter what you think, you can never fully grasp the experience of an adolescent. And that's the parting message from the Anne Frank Museum, is that the diary we all loved is now, it was kind of part of an inner life that people didn't see at the time,
Yeah.
So it's just to say, yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut across you, Tony, but just to bring this back to, the 300 odd parents who are on this.
Yes.
I keep thinking of that line from Leonard Cohen when he did the wonderful concerts a few years ago. We're all here on just the other side of intimacy. So we can't see any of the parents, we can just see each other. But I just wanted to go back to something that Charlotte was saying about the anxiety that not knowing causes us, as parents. Because I remember when you're a parent of a very small child, an infant, your big terror is they're going to choke. And then they get a little bit older and they're able to run around, and your next big fear is they're going to get run over in traffic. And then the next thing from like 10 onwards is, my God, what's happening in their mental lives and their, and when Charlotte was talking about managing that, the anxiety about that unknowing, the thing that struck me is that if you're a psychologist, it's actually much easier, because you can sit in your office, you have time to kind of steady yourself before what comes through the door. You can contain the space. But as a parent, life's happening all over the place. It's, driving from somewhere in the back of the car, or it's often the least opportune moments. Your bubble gets burst and somebody divulges something that, as you said, might make you crash the car. And I suppose I just want to give a little bit of a counterpoint to that thing of, yeah, we do need to be adults. We do need to be healthy adults as parents and mind our own emotion. but that's really hard sometimes.
Yeah, yeah.
And actually, sometimes the best you can do as a parent is express your concern and your anxiety, because we'll all have had experience that sometimes when you don't do that, it comes out in other ways. And the way that I often experience it when parents come with young adults to my clinic is you'll find parents who actually sound angry or frustrated. And it's because there's been this, nowhere to bring that anxiety for so much, and there's been sleepless nights and all. And so I really want to, parents to know this is really bloody hard. And when you're dealing with all this unknown, and sometimes the best you can do is say, gosh, I'm worried about you. Do you want to say a little bit about what's going on? So, anyway, as a counterpoint to, we should all be fabulous and, in our therapeutic kind of position all of the time, which I think is hard.
That's a fabulous point, Gary. Thank you. That's really important. We only have to be good enough, actually. I don't think any of us is feeling fantastic or confident, and no matter what kind of background we may have, this is, you're absolutely right. And so often I think we create illusions that it's possible to parent the perfect child and have them turn out just perfect. And somehow, if you're not doing this, you haven't read the right book, or there's something you're missing, and that's not it at all. That's not it at all, and kids can accept that you're not, I don't know what's going on, and I'm not sure what to say. That can be the best thing to say. I think what they like is something real, actually. It's not perfection. So thank you. That's so important. People are at their wits' end, and they have people, psychologists like me and you, talking at them, telling them how to do it right, and they feel quite guilty and quite, that they're letting their kids down, and they're not.
Well, could we develop this point then? And I'd be interested to know what you guys both think of this. But one of the things that I've caused to think about recently is that psychology does have a little bit of a tradition of making parents feel a bit beaten up sometimes, because a lot of our theories, our developmental theories, have some element that has to do with stuff that somehow went awry in childhood, right? And of course, some of us have had childhoods that have really been a struggle, and for lots of different reasons. But if you're a mammy or a daddy on like a call like this, and you're coming along and you're concerned about one of your children, chances are you're A, doing the best you can, B, riddled with guilt because you feel like you should have done something better. And often actually people who are currently parents of teenagers and early adults are the parents who had least help when their children were young. You were both out to work. You were riddled with guilt about going out to work, but there wasn't as much support for the early crash years, etc., as there is now. Of course, we all know there isn't enough. There isn't enough now. So you can come into this, if going on to Dorania's question, if there is a mental health problem, you can come in very much from the perspective of thinking, I'm part of the problem. Whereas, a big change for us as psychologists has been to move that dial towards seeing parents very much as co-therapists and part of the solution. And there's some really lovely evidence now of recruiting parents as, co-CBT therapists to help keep the work going at home. And I thought, when I was listening to this in the last year, God, that's so different from the psychology of 20 years ago, when it was all, mammies and daddies getting it wrong.
Oh my goodness, Gary! Yeah, I could talk about that all day. I think I hold that as a parent myself, so I'm very well aware of it. I know when I talk to groups of parents and they get opportunity to ask me questions, they often ask me, "What have I done wrong?" And when you try and reassure them, we know reassurance doesn't work, but when you say, "Look, all the research suggests that if you look at this over time, it's much more likely that the parenting follows the child behavior than the other way around. Yet they're associated together, but actually we've got loads of evidence that we adapt our parent. We've all been talking about how we parent our kids in different kinds of ways. Oh my goodness, you've pushed on an open door. I could talk about it forever, because you're absolutely right that I get really frustrated with some of our models that really embed it in this kind of parenting focus. It's not to say that parents can't be really helpful. And parents can be part of the solution out of the problems. Doesn't mean they were part of the problem getting into them. So those two things.
That's a super point. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think actually I can even see in the chat now already that parents are coming in saying that they feel so much better. I think hearing that, a lot of parents sometimes need to hear that, you know, you're actually doing a good job, you're doing okay, and to not feel that sense of guilt.
Yeah, and to use Tony's point about being a good enough parent, I think the single most important thing I ever heard as a psychologist about parenting was that idea from Donald Winnicott of that you don't need to, like, particularly those of us who grew up or you know, were middle class parents, where you're out buying the mamas and papas stuff and, you know, playing Mozart to the unborn child and all of this. And it was nuts. It was an attempt to try to overcome some sense of inadequacy. And that idea of being a good enough parent, you know, is a great one. And I certainly live by that. Sorry, Joanne, I could have crossed you.
No, but I think one thing that's really come up a lot in kind of our past couple of webinars was, you know, how to know when a young person is experiencing, you know, a mental health difficulty, and that you should be concerned. And I suppose, do you have any experience from your clinical work about what are the early warning signs that should be kind of ringing alarm bells in a parent's head?
I think that's you and Charlotte, Gary. You're dealing actively with people who present with
Well, certainly, I can say a couple of things about this, and Charlotte, you no doubt you'll have ideas as well. I think for me, as a clinician, you're always looking for change. You're looking for what's changed in last few months relative to the person's own baseline. And the hard thing about this is, you know, that old adage of the frog in boiling water, you know, that if, you know, you throw a frog into boiling water, it jumps out, but if you put the frog in cold water and you turn up the heat slowly, it stays. And sometimes being in a family can be like that it's really hard to notice change over time, because you're there day in, day out, and change isn't really noticeable day to day. So I often ask people, can you tell me about what's changed in somebody's behavior from between now and, say, some last memorable event? What was it like at Christmas? What was it like last Halloween? What were they like last summer? And so you're trying to get a sense of what has changed in the young person's behavior. And usually you're looking for one of two things. And in my experience, you're looking for evidence of acting in or acting out. And the acting in is somebody either withdrawing from their friends or becoming avoidant of the kind of stuff that you really want to see kids getting on and going out and doing, engaging in either in school or in activities or in college or whatever. And the big behavioral signs of anxiety disorders or avoidance, that's usually what keeps, you know, it's originally about trying to cope with or manage anxiety, but actually kind of keeps you stuck. And then similarly in depression, it's the withdrawal. It's the kind of, you know, all of us, when we're having a bad day, we can take a duvet day and knowing that maybe tomorrow we'll get our energy back. Whereas if it's a depressive disorder, that tends to go on for longer. So I'm really interested in knowing about that, and just looking at the behavior, particularly if you have someone who's not very good at telling you how they feel. Charlotte, you probably have.
Do you know what I was gonna say? Exactly where you started. The big thing for me is change. Apparently the frog thing is a misnomer. When it gets to a certain heat, they do jump. And actually, I think there's something about that, you know, that there's something about trusting your gut as a parent. If you know your kid. Now, there's a few interesting comments, because I think in the chat and in the Q&A around, okay, as psychologists, are we really tuned in? You know, have we got special skills? What if our kid is very different to us? If they have, if they're neurodiverse, so if you have a neurodevelopmental difficulty like autism or ADHD, you might feel very, very different to your kids. But I think in general, when we're tuned into our kids, just as parents, psychology aside, we just spend time with them on a day-to-day basis. Even those small changes start niggling at us. And it could be just adolescence. It could be that, oh my God, I've got to 14 and you're the most embarrassing thing on earth. Or it could be that over time, we just got a little bit more worried and a little bit more worried and a little bit more worried. And I think for me, that's the time when you try and open that communication, because I think you're absolutely right. It's a change from what's normal for your kid. Now, I've got some lovely examples there in the chat and the Q&A around saying that we've got lots of worries or really trying to avoid things, things that, yeah, would suggest that there might be something worth doing about it, that there might be something there. On the other hand, worry is absolutely normal. I think sort of 80% of 7-year-olds onwards worry, 100% by the time you get to teenage years, just from time to time. So anxieties, worries, feeling a bit low from time to time, we can sit with these, we can just say, look, some of this is normal, but if you're seeing that change and if your gut is telling you something's changed, even if it's changed slowly, then that's the time that, just the same as you, Gary, I'd be thinking, oh, there's something to ask about here, there's something to be interested in.
Yeah, and actually just one of the comments that was made about how can you separate these kind of changes that you and I are talking about from, you know, the normal stuff, or the normal stuff to do with puberty and hormones, from the abnormal stuff. And it's a really good question. And so two things. I think your point, Charlotte, about really encouraging parents to trust their gut on this is really important. Sometimes it's happened that people have come to the clinic saying, I know something's wrong, and I can't put my finger on what it is, but I know there's, and I personally, I really value that kind of instinct, you know. In terms of, as a clinician, how you separate out the normal from the abnormal, usually there's two things for me. One is, what is this having an impact on this person's ability to live their life? You know, going to school, engaging with their friends. And I know, you know, somebody's made the comment that COVID makes this stuff much more difficult to estimate. But those valued roles, my friends, my activities, my school, if college, if those things are changed, so certainly that's one thing. And then the other thing is that if it's a normal problem, it tends to be changes day to day or week to week. Often when you're looking at mental health problems, these are problems that have gone on beyond a couple of weeks. So it's become like, you know, for anxiety problem or for depressive problems, it's a minimum of 2 weeks where the problems are there more of the time than not, more days than not, for an extended period of time. So that's one of the other ways that we try to figure that stuff out. And it's hard, and sometimes you can only know then, you know, as you work with somebody over a period of time, and that in itself can be anxiety provoking for parents, because, you know, you show up at a clinic and you want to know what the problem is, and sometimes it can take, you know, a few weeks to figure out what's actually going on and try to disambiguate the problems.
Thanks, Gary. I think that'll actually bring me into my next point in terms of, Tony and Charlotte as well, do you have any tips or tricks that you picked up, I suppose, in your clinical work that you found that you've applied at home in your own kind of personal lives with your own kids?
What are we allowed to admit to? I don't know. I'd be really interested, actually, Tony and Gary. It almost goes back to the point you made, Gary. Knowing some psychology when I had little ones was just a nightmare. Knowing all about attachment and how important it was to be attuned to your child, and I spent all my time worrying that I was doing everything wrong, and I probably was doing a fair bit wrong. And do you know what? It probably didn't have the most dreadful effect, because our models are wrong. both of my children struggle in different ways, and it's been a godsend. And one of the chat says that, my goodness, you got the kind of psychology behind you. But even my older daughter, who struggles more, she will say to me, Mum, stop being a psychologist, and be my mum. So there are things I've learned as a psychologist that I bring into home, but actually there's something just about being mum when I'm at home. So the things that I'm really glad I know about, I know that a panic attack can't kill you. And if you sit and you encourage the breathing to slow down, and you encourage the kind of focusing on the here and now, the panic will go away. So that's something that comes straight out of psychology, and I wouldn't have known if I wasn't a psychologist. I know that worry is a normal thing, and it goes up and down, and that I don't need to worry about every single worry and put every single worry right, because actually it's like whack-a-mole. Worries just pop up and you can whack each one down, and as a parent you can try and solve everything. Don't work like that. Worry is just there and bubbling. So one of the things that I take from psychology that I bring home is to sit with it, and to just try and empathize, try and say, oh, that sounds horrible, that sounds really awful, and not try and fix it, not try and problem solve all the bits, and just let them have those feelings and have those experiences. I'm sure there's a lot of other bits and pieces, but I guess those are the two things that I'm just delighted that I knew from psychology, because otherwise I'd be making a lot more mistakes than I already am.
That's really useful. Thank you, Charlotte. Tony or Gary, do you have anything to add to that?
I think for me, it's not so much what I learned from psychology. Although one thing I learned from psychology, somebody told me once, as a parent, in terms of, trying to do everything right, they said, forget it, okay? They said, we've all been to Chernobyl, we're all contaminated in a way, not so much by radioactive material, but by our own dysfunctional family experiences. We've all grown up. I had no map from my own family. So this was all new to me, raising kids, and we had kids very young. And so he said, so, you got to understand, no matter what you do, you're bringing all that, all the stuff that went wrong for you into your own family. So you can't avoid that. So in a sense, it sounds negative. It's not negative. It's wonderfully freeing. It's it's just accept that you're radioactive, and that that's it, and enjoy your kids. Really enjoy them, because what you're bringing is your own imperfection, your own brokenness from your own life, and that really helped. And that was a psychologist, and it was kind of Winnicott really was saying that, because he says, the other thing you need to know is you're the best parent and the only parent that this kid needs. There isn't anybody else. And if they had Gary and Charlotte as mother and father, father and mother, they would be in an awful way. Who they need is not those two, they need you. And I think that was very helpful. But I suppose the most important lesson I've learned from around youth mental health, I learned from young people, and I learned it in UCD. And I know I've told this story so often, it's probably tedious for people to hear again, but it still is my most important moment in youth mental health. And it was when I set up Headstrong, which became Jigsaw, and I had to come up with a mission statement, all the things we were going to do. And I came up with a fantastic mission statement, I thought, which was that we were going to help young people navigate their journey into adulthood. And I thought that was worthy of a Nobel Prize, and at least to Pulitzer or something. And I had 10 young people in was it F206, in the room there. And I said this to them, I found this mission statement, you see, and I said it to them, and they all dropped their heads. And I knew I'd said something wrong, and that there was something about what I said they didn't like. And then one of them looked at me, she was more courageous than the others, and she said, Tony, we don't want to be helped, we want to be heard. And that was a moment that changed my life, because after Jigsaw then became something that really ensured that young people were listened to and respected more than helped. We helped them later. So I would say that, you know, for me, what I needed when I was 16, 14, 15, 16, 17, life was tough, life was difficult. I didn't really want anybody to fix it for me. I didn't expect that, but I would have loved to have had people who would listen and validate that experience and say, this is tough. This is hard. Like the last year they've been through, it's very hard. It's been very difficult. That doesn't mean they're all mentally ill. It just has been a very difficult year. It's been their World War II, you know, and to listen to that rather than leap in to fix it. Psychologists don't fix anything. I mean, you know, that's why we're, you know, that's what's different. Other people feel they need to help and fix. You know, if we're good at our job, we know we can't. We know that what we can do is we know what to pay attention to and what to ignore and not worry about. But also we know to help the person to find their own voice. And in time, when they do that, they find their own little ways about what to do next. What's the next thing that will be helpful? In other words, not what I'm doing with my life, but what am I doing tonight after this talk? What am I doing tomorrow morning? You know, and so we have simple ways of asking questions, but we don't fix anybody. Okay, that's not something any human being can do for anybody else. We listen.
Can I follow up on that, because I think there's several really great points there. But one of the things that an idea that I came across as a schema therapist, which is a kind of a form of CBT for working with people who've had terrible childhood experiences that have left them with all kinds of emotional difficulties that go on for, or can go on for a long time, is the idea of reparenting. So how you help someone to learn to parent themselves. And of course, those of us who've struggled with our own childhood stuff as we parent our children need to kind of figure out, how do we parent ourselves at the same time? And you know, somebody broke it down, a really excellent psychologist from the US, into 4 very simple steps that have really stayed with me in the last few months. And the first thing, and this is directly related to what Tony was saying, is the idea that you always have to start with, what's the emotion that you're feeling? You know, I think parenting of the 1960s and 70s was all about skipping that part and jumping on to providing reassurance. You know, I don't know if any of you remember your mothers telling you, "Oh, don't worry about that. That's grand." So did that ever help anybody? You know, to be told, "Don't be worried about that." So starting with the emotion, and actually as a neuroscientist, what's really interesting is as soon as you name an emotion, part of its energy goes down. Literally, your ability to say the word of the emotion allows your frontal lobes to kind of reduce some of the activity sloshing around your limbic system. So that's a really useful first step. Just say whatever you think the emotion is. Then the second thing, people will know that there's all kinds of interest in mindfulness-based practice and the idea of sitting with emotions. And myself and Tony were talking about this recently, and I was saying to him, I really struggle with that idea of sitting with something. I wasn't built for sitting with, but for me, what that means is trying to understand the emotion, because the most lovely thing to receive from a parent is somebody to be saying, of course, sure, that totally makes sense because of, you know, whatever the context was or whatever the hurt was. So having that second bit of, after being able to name the emotion, being able to then, you know, understand, or we also call that validating the emotion, is really, really important. And then the third step is just bringing a bit of hope. And that's maybe where a little bit of reassurance can come in once you've done those first 2 bits, where you're saying, look, and often the hope is, this is how it feels today, and tomorrow it might look a little bit different, you know. And then after, you know, putting that kind of emotional arm around the shoulder that brings a little bit of hope, the first the final part is saying, okay, what do we need to be able to do to make today manageable? So that's just dealing with the reality. And that little 4-point plan of naming the emotion, understanding the emotion, bringing a little note of hope and then trying to deal with reality. Boy, I think that's powerful. And it really helps me then when I'm trying to parent myself while parenting my kids, or parent myself when I'm working with people who need to learn to parent themselves as adults.
Lovely, thank you, Gary. I just want to thank the panelists for being so open and honest. I think I'm getting so many messages in the chat to say how useful and how much better you're making parents feel, that they're really glad that they attended. I might bring Maeve in now, who's been keeping an eye on the Q&As, just to answer some questions that parents have been putting forward to the panelists.
Yeah, we've had a lot of questions, so we might not get through them all, but we'll get through a few of them. So first of all, there's been quite a few people talking about if they see that an adolescent is struggling, but they don't want to talk, or they clam up, or they're just very, very quiet, and how would you approach that?
I think for me, my first instinct would be to be very honest, that in a way, in the question is the answer. Because I think what I would say if it was my young person, or a young person in trouble, is, look, what I notice is, you know, you've been very withdrawn recently, you know, you've been on your own a lot. And I'm imagining that maybe there's something on your mind, or there's something that's worrying you. And does that make any sense to you? Am I on the right track? Am I just reading something that's not there? You know, I'm concerned, and I just want to check that with you, you know? So I'm not, you know, I'm starting with my experience or my observations and asking them to help me to check out if there's any sense to those at all. You know, I'd go at it, you know, slightly sideways and slightly asking a question. So if you like, they're answering me in order to make me feel either I'm completely nuts, or there's nothing wrong, or actually, yeah. And I might say, and I don't need you to talk about this now, you know, I don't need you right now to, it's okay if you want to, you know, be private about this, but I just want to know, am I right in my sense that something is not quite right? You know, that's enough of a connection. And maybe tomorrow, and then, or you might say, as Gary was saying there, you know, look at, that must be very hard, but you know, I'm here, and you know, maybe tomorrow or the next day you want to talk about that. That would be fine.
And just to follow up with that, Tony, maybe it's because mine are littler, but also to think of those kids really who don't have the language.
Yeah.
One of the things I tend to use quite a lot at home is the words, you know, so I've had a bad day at school. Okay, can you tell me, are the words there? Because often I'll get, no, there's no words, and I'm like, that's fine. I don't need words. Let's just, you know, let's go on and have a hug. Let's go and do and sit something. Do we need to go and put the telly on? Oh gosh, telly's very old fashioned, isn't it? We don't need to go and find the iPad. But, you know, so even just acknowledging that sometimes you can't find those words. And it's amazing that for me, just that little phrase in our house of, are the words to describe this? So I'm feeling awful, or I'm just very quiet. You're very quiet today. Yes. Are the words to tell me? No, there's no words. That's enough just to let them know that I want to know when they find those words. And it's very, very simple.
And just to follow that, I mean, another way we used to do it is there a color? What's your color for happiness? You know,
yeah.
And it's yellow. Oh, great. Yellow is a beautiful color. It makes me feel happy too when I see it. So what color do you feel today? Yeah. You know, is there a color for what you're feeling? And then not why do you feel that, but if you were to kind of move from dark purple to yellow, what would have to happen to change? What might help you to move to, you know, something to talk in color, which is a different code rather than language, you know, if they don't have the words. It seems to be another version of what you're saying, Charlotte.
I know we've got questions to answer, but just to come back on again to you, Tony, of maybe it's also not what to say, what not to say, is that the why is always a killer question. Just maybe that if you go away with one thing from this webinar, just don't ask why are you feeling like that, or why did that happen. The why is a killer question. It can be used, and again, some of you be like, but I use that all the time, it's really successful. If it works in your house, that's brilliant. But in general, the why, most of us don't know why. Going back to Gary's point of kind of working out, oh, what is it that I'm feeling? What was the understanding of? We have to work for hours to even get our own emotions.
I think
it doesn't work.
I had a moment in my life with John Kabat-Zinn, who's the mindfulness teacher, you know, and I went to him. We were on retreat, and I went to him because I was having a really bad day. I mean, long story, doesn't matter. And I just went to him and I said, I'm having a really tough day. And he said something to me that really has stayed with me. He said, Tony, whatever you're feeling, I bet there's a very good reason for why you're feeling that way. And, you know, we can figure that out sometime, you know, together, or maybe someday, or, you know. And I think if you could say anything to a young person, it would be that whatever they're feeling, there is a good reason. It may not be evident to them or to you. That's okay. We can work on this together because I care about you, and I think this is very important, whatever's going on.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you both so much. I think maybe we'll get one more, Dorania.
Oh yeah.
Okay. We had a couple of questions around self-esteem and building self-esteem, connected both to body positivity, but then also just about making teenagers feel empowered. So any thoughts on that?
Well, I hated my body as a teenager and really would be hopeless on that one, probably, except to share that interesting bit of information.
I wonder if it's the flip side of some of the things we've been talking about, is just as your kid will know if you're not being genuine by asking, you know, is something wrong? Something's going on, I can see it, is something wrong? They'll also know if you're not genuine in your praise. They'll also know if you're being mom. You would say that, you're my mom, you're biased. Yeah. And so what I say is that it connects best when it really is that genuine moment of connection, that there is just something that touches you about your kid. And it doesn't matter, again, whether they've just done something with the way they look and you think, oh, you look fab today, I love that, or whether it is something that they've tried in you, whatever it is. If it touches you as a parent and then you comment on that, then that is going to stick much better than very repeatedly. I really like the way you look, I really like the way your body is, you know, you need to be proud of your body. The lectures don't work, the connection is what works. Really find those things that move you, because if they move you, there's something going on in that moment, and just comment on. You can see my style. It's lovely actually having the three of us here, because I've now got brilliant fantasies about Tony being this very chilled, relaxed parent, because that's how he's presenting. Gary has solutions and it is straightforward. And look at me, I'm the one with the big hands. This fits for me and my family. When I praise, it's over the top. I do it for my students, I do it for kids in the clinic, I do it for my own kids. Again, don't try and be someone different. If you're calm like Tony, give praise in a calm way. Don't be afraid of being an embarrassing parent just because that's who you are. Embrace the embarrassment, but use those moments of connection.
That's great.
Yeah. Actually, that's a lovely kind of synopsis, I think, of what good self-esteem is, Charlotte, when there's an identity between how you feel and what you do. And, you know, I think the big challenge when you're a teenager is you always think you should be somebody else and you should be feeling something else. And confidence comes from having, you know, somebody allow you to be okay with the feeling you have at the moment. You know, as Tony was saying, even if you don't know why you have that feeling, it can be that's the moment of, you know, positive self-esteem. It's where you really are confident, when you're just saying, this is how I feel, you know, doesn't matter whether it's good or not, You know, it's just how I feel. I suppose my last thought on that was that somebody said to me once, you know, thoughts are just thoughts, but feelings are facts. You know, and we can argue all day about who's right and who's wrong about thoughts, but you can never tell somebody that they're wrong to have the feeling they have, and if they don't get to own that, well, that's fabulous.
I think I just one final thing, since we move to the next generation in my family, you've heard about the one following, but I have a granddaughter who is in Spain, and she's a very beautiful girl. She's strikingly blonde and beautiful, and 7. And you know, it's funny, I was talking to my son, and he's quite concerned at the number of people who are telling her all the time she's beautiful. And you know, it struck me, it's like, and I'm very careful not, I think, of course, I think she's beautiful. Of course I do. But I don't make a big deal about it. What I tell her is what I love that she does, and that, you know, that she's really good at knowing what the rabbit needs, or she's very good at knowing what her sister needs, or, you know, I try to reward something unique about her that is genuine, or she's got a great sense of music, you know, or so I don't talk about her appearance so much, because I think that's making too big a deal of that. But of course, I mean, I love the way Charlotte just pours her love and her out freely. That is great, and I don't want to stop anybody being themselves. But you know, I just always just find the thing that every young person, I mean, a lot of them can be hard to take, but there's always something that each young person has that there's something, and if you can see that gift and validate it and encourage it, I think that means a great deal to them. You know, not to make too big a deal about the body, if it's whether they're comfortable or uncomfortable with it. You know, it's a very unstable place to build your self-esteem from. You know.
So just conscious of time, I was wondering if the panelists might just have like one 30-second tip that you'd like parents to take away from what we talked about today. I might start with Tony, because you're next to me on my screen.
Oh, I'm sorry. I guess I really believe in young people, and I believe that they will face struggles and difficulties, but I believe that they have within themselves, you know, a capacity to grow in spite of that. And I particularly believe in Gary's kids and Charlotte's kids, and because you just know they have been loved, and whatever they're facing, however awful it is, coming from that sense of just knowing they're loved is going to give them an extraordinary capacity to get through this, you know. So I believe in them, you know. That's what I would say. Believe in your children.
Brilliant, thank you, Tony. And then Gary, you're next after Tony.
Yeah, something similar. You know, I would say on a personal note, I think this was the hardest year of all of the years to date to be a parent. Certainly for me personally, I struggled with the COVID thing, and I thought it was really hard. I was saying that to somebody, and the most helpful thing that anybody said to me was, it's 2 words you got to remember: patience and trust. Having patience and trust in your kid, and patience and trust in yourself as a parent. And I got to say, we've been living by that, and I don't know who has, over the last few months. And it's I think it's been wise advice for us.
Thank you, Gary. And Charlotte?
Super. Oh my goodness, it's dreadful going last after you two. I think one of the things that's run through a lot of the things we've said is connection. And I say that very advisedly as someone who hasn't always connected brilliantly with her kids and has worked very hard at doing that. So my I guess my 30-second would be: find all the excuses you can to do the good stuff. And sometimes the good stuff, again, in lockdown, I'm really lucky to be by the sea. Sometimes the good stuff is on the beach. But you know what? Sometimes the good stuff is just lying on the bed next to. But don't oversweat all that difficult stuff. Find every excuse you can to do the good stuff and to connect, because that will set you up forever.
Perfect ending. Thank you. Wonderful.
I just want to say a big thank you to our panelists tonight, Tony, Gary and Charlotte. I really appreciate you and giving up your time to talk and how honest and open you were. I also just want to say thank you to Professor Ailish Hennessy, to Maeve, Anya and Kira, who've been instrumental in helping me organise these webinars. And just to say as well to the audience that we have our last webinar next week, and it's on self-compassion approaches with young people. So thank you very much to the audience for joining us.